welcome to the next installment. We're going to talk about the respiratory system. So now take a big deep breath in. Thank your respiratory system for that, and we're going to talk all about it. So hold on to your hats, here we go. So remember, what we're going to do is we're going to read some information. We'll figure out what's the most important, take your notes on it, see how you do with that. And again, if you have any questions, let me know. So let's read. Our lungs fuel us with oxygen, the body's life-sustaining gas. They breathe in air, then extract the oxygen and pass it into the bloodstream where it rushed off to the tissues and organs that require it to function. A nice introduction. So let's just make sure that we understand it. We do. And make sure that our notes have got a nice title of the respiratory system, today's date, and let's keep going. So respiration. Oxygen drives the process of respiration, which provides our cells with energy. I hope there's a little alarm bell going off. When we exhale, we produce carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Without this vital exchange, our cells would quickly die and leave the body to suffocate. Is anybody else thinking? Doesn't this sound a little bit like cellular respiration? Could you please give me the formula for it? Okay, so hopefully you remembered that the formula is glucose, or C6H12O6, plus oxygen, O2, yields carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and ATP. What we have to remember is that we ingest, we eat to get this glucose into our body. We inhale to get the oxygen into our body. We exhale to get out the carbon dioxide, and we excrete this water. In fact, put your hand in front of your mouth like this. Did you feel it gets a little damp? That's because a little bit of water vapor also comes out with our breath. But we also use the rest of that water as a byproduct. We put it into our body, and any extra stuff we get rid of and excrete it with our urinary system and digestive system and all sorts of other places. Okay. And then, obviously, ATP. Hopefully you remember that it stands for the energy molecule adenosine triphosphate. So do you notice that we in an X, I before E? Oh, wait. Do you remember, this is where I have my little aside. Do you remember in grammar that you were learning I before E except after C? Did you know there are so many exceptions to it? But there's not an exception here. We always inhale and ingest before we exhale and excrete. But anyway, so the I before E rule, I found something really interesting that helped my brain, and maybe it will help yours. That I before E except after C is only when it rhymes with B, like receive, deceive rhymes with B. But then if it doesn't rhyme with B, like science or ancient, then it's the other way around. I thought that was really clever. Okay, there you go. That's my little aside moment for now. I'm sure there'll be others. Okay, let's keep going. So since the lungs process air, they are the only internal organs that are constantly exposed to the external environment. Pause, let's just think about that. Only internal, that is meant for external. Okay, well, is there an external that's meant for external? Yeah, of course, our skin. Okay, keep going. Central to the human respiratory system, they breathe in between 2,100 and 2,400 gallons, or 8 to 9,000 liters of air each day. The amount needed to oxygenate our blood pumped through our heart daily. Wow, that's a lot, right? Can you picture that? How much that is? So that volume of 8 to 9,000 liters of air that needs to be processed by your lungs every day is quite an enormous volume to think about. So here's a picture of a 2-liter soda bottle. Imagine that you had 4 to 4,500 of those that are lined up, let's say on the gym floor. You would be seeing them cover the entire thing and maybe even more. That's an awful lot of air volume. It makes me think of a movie called The Lorax. If you've not seen it, you should. It's a really good movie. And in it, there is a man who is going to deliver air to a family of 4. And it's basically the size of a water cooler water bottle. Would that be enough for a family of 4 for the week? I think not. Let's watch the movie.
Welcome to Sneedville, a city they say that was plastic and fake. And they liked it that way. No nature, no flowers, no one seemed to mind. But a secret was waiting for someone to find.
So no, that was not nearly enough air for a family, because remember, you need huge amounts of air for one person. So what was it, the reason for the delivery? It was because there were no trees. We need trees in order to produce the air, the oxygen, as a byproduct of photosynthesis. And this then allows us to breathe in the beautiful air that the trees and the plants are making. Oh, but we're cutting them down. Eee, is that a problem? We might run out of air soon. Think on that. Okay, so did you realise that your lungs are asymmetrical? So these two lungs are made up of a complete lattice work of tubes, and they're suspended on either side of the heart, inside the chest cavity on a framework of elastic fibres. So they are asymmetrical because of the heart. So the left is actually smaller than the right. And what you can see right here is the heart is smudging its way into the lungs of the left lung. And so our lungs are actually made up of lobes, like the lobes of our brain, but really there are lobes, sections of our lungs, right? So on the right side, there are three lobes: the superior, the middle, and the inferior. Aren't you glad that it's just regular names that you can figure out? Superior meaning above, middle, and then inferior being below, rather than some funky name that it's very hard to pronounce. Well, there we go. Yay. On the left, you've only got two lobes. So the superior and the inferior lobe. Now, I'm often asked, is it possible to live without a lung? Yeah, it is. There are some people that only have one lung or lose a lobe and have a lobectomy, but you really want your lungs. You want your lungs to breathe and to function and to work. So that's how the lungs are worked out. And this chest x-ray, you can see where the lungs are. Do you ever wonder what those white is? Let's see. Right here. Do you know what those are? They're the ribs. Ooh. All right, let's keep going. So air is drawn in via the mouth and the nose, and the latter, the nose, acting as an air filter by trapping dust particles on its hairs. The air is warmed up before passing down the windpipe, where it's divided at the bottom between two airways called bronchi that lead to either lung. Whoa, that was a lot of information in one paragraph. Let's break it down. So, we're going to breathe in through our nose and our mouth. Well, which one do we want to prefer to breathe in? We want to breathe in through our nose because remember, these organs, they're internal, but they're completely exposed to the external environment. So it needs to have quite a bit of protection. So the first thing of protection is your nose hairs. Okay, I'm going to have just a little public service announcement. Gentlemen, your nose hair grows over time, and it's very important that you keep it manicured, let's say. I had a professor in college who had this one really long nose hair, and on it glistened a little snot droplet. And I don't remember what he talked about quite often because I was just so fascinated watching this snot droplet on this nose hair wibble wobble, and you kind of waiting for it to go flying, and you have to duck, otherwise you're going to get right. Let them be more interested in you than your nose hair. So trim it. Don't pluck it. Don't wax it, because we need it, because it is there for filtration. So that was my little public service announcement. Okay, so nose hair, it helps with filtration. Now, let's say that you're breathing in some pollen, some allergens, some smoke, something that irritates the lining of sneezing. Why do we sneeze? So we sneeze because this helps to expel what is causing the irritation within our nasal passages. So it doesn't get into our lungs. It doesn't get into our body. It doesn't become this external problem that then becomes internal. So we sneeze to get rid of it. Okay, cool. But then have you ever noticed that after you sneeze, your nose runs a bit. Why? Well, it's because there is some mucus that is being done to flush out the allergen and wash out your nasal passages. So this mucus, aka snot, right, it is going to wash out any dirt or debris. But if there is dirt or debris that gets up inside your nose, it is going to trap it and form boogers. Now, I don't know about you, but it always makes me think of the beginning part of Jurassic Park, that movie from way back when. And there's a lot of people that haven't actually seen it. So I'm going to say definitely watch it. Great movie. But this is the bit that it makes me think of.
Sometimes, after biting a dinosaur, the mosquito would land on the branch of a tree and get stuck in the sap.
So now we have these boogers that are trapped. Do not pick your nose. Why not? Because your fingy is dirty, number one. As you go up and excavate trying to find this booger, right? It is going to add more bacteria into your schnoz and cause more issues. Secondarily, did you know that if you pick your nose, you can actually thin out the membranes of your nasal passages and cause them to bleed? But you can also scratch and cause little cuts. And now all of that bacteria is getting inside your cuts. And now you have got this very inflamed, infected nose. And you have to go to the doctors and get antibiotics. And they go, "You know what happened?" And they were like, "We do. You picked your nose," right? So don't pick your nose, because not only is it very bad for your nose, but it's also really bad because now you've got boogers all over your fingy. And all of that bacteria and everything, you're spreading it around. So how do you get rid of if you've got snuffly nose? Well, for goodness sake, don't sniff. Oh no. Okay, sniffing, your body is like, "We've trapped this bacteria, this virus, this pollen, it's really bad for you, we're going to get rid of it." And you think, well, I'm going to overrule my body and sniff it up. So instead of it being able to be washed out, you're drawing it back into your schnoz, into your nasal passages, and causing it to spread even further. Or what's even worse is, I didn't put a picture of actually somebody hocking a loogie because it makes me so grossed out. It flips my stomach. In fact, my stomach's turning as I'm talking about this. But this is from Finding Nemo, to the summit of Mount Wanahockaloogie. Anyway, the hockaloogie, right? This is whereby somebody sniffs up their snot so much that it draws it back through their sinus passages, back and into their mouth, and then they spit it out. Why is that so bad? Because your body is saying, "Let's flush out this bad stuff." And you're saying, "No, let's take it in and spread it throughout my entire sinuses, through the back of my throat, which could drip down into my stomach, and put it through my mouth. And now I'm spreading and spitting it everywhere for somebody else to pick up this virus, this bacteria, this nastiness," right? Don't do it. It's bad for you. Really bad for you. It's bad for everybody else. And it's just gross. So don't hock a loogie. So what are you going to do? If you do have a snotty nose, what are you going to do? Blow your nose and throw the tissue away and wash your hands. Okay, next. The other thing about this mucus, this snot, is it allows for lubrication of the nasal passages. Now, if you've ever been a mouth breather and gone to sleep, right, you might snore, you might wake up and you might have a very dry throat. Well, your mouth is not meant to have all of this air being drawn over it. It will dry it out. Thankfully, your schnoz has this mucus, and this is meant to help keep the nasal passages all lubricated and be able to withstand this air being dragged over it. So very important. Okay, the next one. Why is snot used in smell? Well, that's a good question. Okay, so these odoriferous materials, these odor particles, odorant molecule, gets up inside our nose, and it reaches the mucus layer that lines our nasal passages. And here's the thing, in order for those olfactory receptor cells to pick up this odor, it has to dissolve into the mucus. So what happens when you get a cold and your nose is all blocked up and you don't taste anything? Because remember, that layer of mucus is going to get really thick to protect the inflammation and keep washing out your nose, because you get runny nose and it's all snuffly and everything, but everything tastes bland because sense of smell and sense of taste are interconnected. So if you've got this thick layer of mucus, then all of these odor particles aren't going to reach the olfactory receptor smells, and you're not going to be able to smell anything, which means you can't really taste anything. Once the odoriferous material gets inside the mucus, dissolves, and registers with the olfactory receptor cells, it sends an electrochemical signal to the brain. And if you remember, it's going to go to the olfactory bulb, which was those dingle dangles on the very ventral anterior portion of the brain, right? At the front underneath, those two little dingle dangles, as I called them. Those are the olfactory bulbs. And they're the thing that are going to take that receptor cells energy and signal and go, oh, it smells like roses, oh, smells good, or oh, it smells like my dog farted. Now, I don't know about you, but I think about this when my dog toots. I'm like, that's very unpleasant. In order for me to smell that fart, I had to absorb it. And here's another really pleasant piece of information. Did you realize that your farts, or your dog's farts, or if you go into a bathroom and it's really stinky, that fart contains micro clouds of poo particles. So in order to smell somebody's fart or a dog's fart, you've actually absorbed some of their poo. Aren't you glad you're taking this course? Okay, let's keep going. So not only is it going to be, this mucus is going to be really important for flushing out and cleaning and trapping and being protective. It also helps with lubrication, it helps with smell, but it also helps with warming up your air. Well, there's a reason for it, okay? And it goes back to molecules. Okay, I want you to do this with me. If you were a solid, okay, we're going to put our hands together and be a molecule, right? If we're a solid, you're going to be tightly packed together and vibrating. But if I add a little bit more heat, okay, these are going to get a little bit more whoop, 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 until they become a liquid. Okay, do this with your hands because, again, being kinesthetic learning here, okay, we're doing this with our hands. Why are they not flying off? Because they've got little molecular forces that are keeping them together, but they're moving a little bit more. Okay, I like to think of this as they're dancing, so they might be having a slow waltz if it is a very cold liquid, or they might be hip hop dancing and crumping and doing all of that if it is a hot liquid, until they get so much energy they can break free, and now they're whizzing around and they're whizzing around and they've got lots of movement. Whoop, 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 whoop. What happens if I cool it down? It's going to come back together and have that dance and cool it down some more, and it becomes tightly packed together and vibrating. So why did I just do all of this? Why is this to do with air? Okay, well, let's think about oxygen and the air that we breathe in. So if we're in a nice warm area, those air molecules are moving around very quickly, and so they can easily move in and out of us. But if we are breathing in cold air, those molecules are not moving as quickly. And so we're trying to breathe in these particles are not wanting to move as quickly, and so it makes it more difficult. Okay, another question for you. What happens to pipes or tubes or anything really when it gets cold? It is going to constrict. It is going to get smaller. So as we're breathing in this cold air, and it's going into our lungs, the lungs that are made up of teeny tiny tubies are going to go and shrink up which makes it even more difficult to get that air in. So if we breathe cold air in through our mouth, we have a direct line. We don't have any protection. We don't have any filtering. We don't have any mucus. And we're now causing this air to go straight in and our lungs, which makes it even more difficult to breathe. So breathe through your schnoz, through your nose, because as the air comes in, as you look in that picture, you can see how the air is coming in and it goes through our sinuses. And those sinuses are going to be there to help to warm up the air and make it so that it doesn't cause this shrinking effect for the lungs. Very cool, right? Okay, question for you, see if you're still with me. What part of the brain, specifically which part of the brain, is responsible for smelling? Okie dokie, I hope you got it right, that it was the olfactory bulbs. Okay, so now let's go back to this one right here. So air is being drawn in through our nose and it goes to the back and it has to decide, same thing as if I'm breathing in through my mouth or through my nose, right? It is going to the back of my throat and that has a special name. It's called the pharynx. Great Scrabble word. The pharynx, right, is the back of the throat. That's just basically what it's called. And it has to decide at the pharynx if the air is going to go down the trachea, which is the windpipe, or it is going to go where air goes down, or it goes down the food tube, which is the esophagus. So the pharynx is the region of the back of the throat where those two tubies are saying, here I am. That's it. That's what I want you to know. Pharynx, back of the throat. Okay, let's keep going. Here we go. Within the lungs, the mucus-lined bronchi split like branches into a tree of tens of thousands of even smaller tubes called bronchioles, which connect to tiny sacs called alveoli. The average adult's lungs contain about 600 million of these spongy air-filled structures. There are enough alveoli in just one lung to cover an area roughly the size of a tennis court. Wow, that's a lot, right? That's an awful lot. So again, air is going to travel in through my nose, preferably than my mouth. It's going to go down the trachea, down to the bronchi, to the bronchioles, to the alveoli. Okay, do this with me, a hand action. We've got the trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles, the alveoli. One more time. Trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. Okay, think about that as you're thinking about how the air goes. Here's some kinesthetic learning for you. Boop. All right. Okay. So as we inhale, the air goes down the trachea. It branches off into the bronchi, which go into each of the lungs. And then the tens of thousands of little teeny tiny tubes called bronchioles. And then along the length of those bronchioles are the alveoli, little round sacs. Okay. Let's talk more about the trachea. All right, so what I want you to do now is I want you to lift up your hand and run your hand down the front of your neck. Now, don't press too hard because you might make yourself gag, right? Particularly, here's your voice box. And right below it, you should be able to feel some ridges, right? It's not smooth. You should feel there are rings. Well, that's because there are rings of cartilage that go around the trachea only 5/8 of the way around to help to reinforce it because you don't want it to collapse. Okay, when my kids were little, they would get a drink, right, and a straw in it. And as most typical kids, they would chew on the straw and they would make it flat, right? Now they're trying to suck up the drink from this flattened straw and it makes it really difficult, right? And they're like, I can't get the drink out because they chewed it and they made it flat. Well, we don't want flat tracheas because if you're trying to get air in and it's a tube, well, you're not going to get the air in and that's going to be a problem, right? No good. So, this cartilage is there to help keep it reinforced. Now, why is it only reinforced 5/8 of the way around? Because right behind it is where the esophagus sits. This is the food tube. So I want you to imagine, right, that you're trachea was closed all the way around, and these are the rings of cartilage. And you've got a food particle that is going to go down the food tube that's going next to it, right? So do this with your hands. Can you feel it getting caught on every knobble as it goes around? Now we're going to do it, but we'll go on the inside. Ready? Slide down. Can you see how it's the reason why we don't have the rings all the way around is so it doesn't catch all that food as it goes down the tube that's running right behind it. So it goes 5/8 of the way around so that food can go down the esophagus without being caught on those rings of cartilage in the trachea. But there's enough support with those rings to keep the trachea open. Now, I mentioned your voice box. The voice box actually is called the larynx. Now, this is what I want you to do. These are the vocal cords as you're breathing. This is the vocal cords of a singer. Can you see how as you're making sound, they vibrate and then they open up when you take a big breath in? So I want you to put your hand on your vocal cords. Yes, we're going to sing. Okay, ready? Okay, I know I can't sing, but I want you to feel your vibrations. Here we go. Ready? Oh, oh. Can you feel that there are different vibrations? And that's to do with the frequency of how much these little vocal cords, these larynx, they're actually called the glottis, are vibrating against each other. Okay, and that allows us to have this modulation of sound. Now, we then cause speech to happen by moving our teeth, our lips, our tongue around to then change this sound coming out of my mouth that is now going to be made into different words because of the way that I move the mouth to get the sound out. How cool is that? Well, I think it's very cool. So as we are going to swallow our food, how do we make sure that the food goes down the food tube and not down the breathing tube? Well, there is a flap of cartilage called the epiglottis that closes over the top of the trachea as we are swallowing. Here's another image of it here. You can see how it closes over as we swallow, and it prevents the food from going down into our trachea or windpipe. The thing, it's gone down the wrong tube, right? Well, this is prevented by the epiglottis, which is why it's really important that you shouldn't talk with your mouth full, because you still got food in there, and as you inhale, that opens up and you could actually inhale that food, which could lead to choking. Now, choking, universal sign of choking, right? We're going to come back to choking in a little while, so let's put a pin in that, and we will come back to it shortly. Ooh, what was another word for our voice box? So hopefully you realize that it was the larynx, right? Okay. Moving on. So the alveoli, these are where the crucial gas exchange takes place. The air sacs are surrounded by a dense network of minute blood vessels or capillaries, which connect to the heart. Those that link to the pulmonary arteries carry deoxygenated blood that needs to be refreshed, and oxygen passes through the incredibly thin walls of the alveoli into the capillaries and is then carried back to the heart by the pulmonary veins. At the same time, carbon dioxide is removed from the blood through the same process of diffusion. Okay, that was a lot in this paragraph. Let's make some connections. What have we already learnt about capillaries? They're very thin-walled, and they need to be in order for the exchange to occur. Other things that we learnt, arteries away from the heart. So pulmonary arteries going from the right side of the heart, taking the deoxygenated, it's not really deoxygenated, it's just low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, takes that blood to the lungs, where it's going to go around these alveoli like this net going around all of the alveoli to allow for the exchange of the carbon dioxide and oxygen, and then it delivers the oxygenated, highly oxygenated blood back to the heart through the pulmonary veins and dumps it into the left side of the heart, into the left atrium. Okay, we've made our connection. Now, let's remember, how many of these alveoli do we have? In a particular adult lung, you have 6 million of these. I wouldn't like to be the person that counted it. But if you put them and spread them all out, that would equal the size of a tennis court. Now look at that person. And that whole surface area of that tennis court is in his chest. How? It's because they are so thin and small. Whoa, pretty clever, right? There was another crucial word that you needed to know, and that was diffusion. Now, I've put this in red because I want you to know it. Know this definition. Now, write it down. Pause, write it down. Okay, diffusion is the movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. Okay, so as we're breathing in, we've got a huge amount of oxygen in our air that we're breathing in. We've still got some carbon dioxide, we've got some nitrogen, we've got all different particles in the air. Okay, the majority of our air is actually nitrogen, but there we go. So we have this big bit of oxygen in there. And our blood that is wrapping around these capillaries has lower amount of oxygen in our blood. And so the high oxygen goes from inside the alveoli, rushes into the blood supply and oxygenates the blood cells. At the same time, those blood cells are carrying the carbon dioxide. And because the alveoli contains some carbon dioxide, but not a lot, the region of high concentration is in our blood. And it moves into the alveoli where there's lower. And so we have this constant exchange from high to low. Okay, so then we have this lovely breathing that we can now exhale the higher carbon dioxide. Do we still exhale oxygen? Yes. Do we still exhale all of the other particles? Yes. In fact, let's look at the difference between inhaled and exhaled air. We can see that when we inhale the air, the component of oxygen is about 21%. And when we exhale, we give off about 17%. So we're using only a small amount of that oxygen. But look how much carbon dioxide, from 0.04 to 4%. So significantly more carbon dioxide is being exhaled. Which some people are like, well, when you're giving breast with CPR, how is it that you're giving them oxygen? Because you're breathing out, you're just giving them carbon dioxide. But look how much oxygen is in that breath. It's still enough to help oxygenate their non-oxygenating blood. So CPR breaths are very important. Okay. But I want to talk to you about suffocation. When we're looking at the alveoli, okay, we can see that typically we're going to have a higher concentration of oxygen in the alveoli than in the blood. And it is going to move into the bloodstream because high to low. What we typically want to happen is the carbon dioxide to leave because there is higher concentration of carbon dioxide in our blood than in the alveoli. But in the case of suffocation, where we're not getting enough air, it is not that we're not getting enough oxygen, but rather the carbon dioxide level is significantly higher within the alveoli than in the blood, or that is equal and it's not coming out, right? So we then end up with too much carbon dioxide in our blood, which causes a whole host of problems, right? So I often see movies and go, yeah, right. And one of those is Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones, in this movie here, I'm going to play it for you, and you tell me why. Okay, so in this movie, right, the water's now on fire. They are now tipped over a coffin, and they've now crawled underneath, and they've got a pocket of air above them. Why would this not work? Well, Because eventually they're going to be breathing out the carbon dioxide into this coffin, into this air, and they've only got a limited amount of air. It's not that they run out of oxygen, it's that that air concentration inside that coffin is going to get too much carbon dioxide, and they're not going to be able to get rid of the carbon dioxide from inside them. That's going to cause a problem. Another movie that I think of is Pirates of the Caribbean.
This is either madness or brilliance. This is either madness.
It's remarkable how often those two traits coincide.
So again, not only would that not work because of they would run out of oxygen carbon dioxide exchangeability, but also the buoyancy would be a problem. So when you see movies and things like that, take it all with a pinch of salt because it's not always true. Okay, so a very important question. What is the definition of diffusion? Make sure you know this, write it in. The rate at which we breathe is controlled by the brain, which is quick to sense changes in gas concentrations. This certainly is in the brain's interest. It's the body's biggest user of oxygen and the first organ to suffer if there's a shortage. So if our brain is hungry, it is going to send signals to increase the rate at which we breathe and increase the rate at which we pump our blood in order to get that oxygen around to our brain. So our breathing rate, approximately in an adult, is 12 to 20 times in a minute. Newborns much quicker. Why? Because they've got to get their lungs working, their smaller lungs need more capacity, right? But as we exercise, we're obviously going to increase our breathing rate in order to maintain the amount of oxygen that's in our brain. Because think about it, if we're running, our muscles in our arms, our legs, our abdomen, they're going to need more oxygen to drive cellular respiration in order to make the ATP, the energy molecule, in order to make these muscles do that one action, which is to pull, right? So in order for this muscles and to work, it's going to use up some oxygen. Well, our brain still needs to maintain that right level. So it is going to say, hey, although you guys need some oxygen, I still need my oxygen requirements. So it increases the amount that we breathe. Do you see my little picture here? These are my notes so far. This is everything that we've written so far. And if you look right here in the beginning of the head here that I've drawn, you can see I put controls rate of breathing, and these brackets represent concentration of O2 and CO2. So it's not just the lack of oxygen, it's the increase in carbon dioxide that will throw us out of homeostasis. Ooh, delightful word. I hope you remember what it is. Homeostasis, remember, is this even distribution of all of our body mechanics, everything, levels, right? Everything needs to be maintained at this one level. And if it goes out of whack, then our body is going to respond to it. So an example of this was endothermy for our body temperature, but also an example of this would be our oxygen and carbon dioxide concentrations, which will mean that we either breathe more or we'll, need to make sure that we have the right amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay. The actual job of breathing is done mainly by the diaphragm, the sheets of muscle between the chest and the abdomen. Remember, this was the part that separated the thoracic from the abdominal pelvic cavity. These muscles contract when we breathe in and expand the lungs and draw in air. We breathe out simply by relaxing the diaphragm, and the lung deflates like balloons. All right, stop! Stand up, Okay, now I want you to tell me where your lungs are. Yes, you're going to stand up for two reasons. One, so you can access your lungs, and two, so we can get that blood going and, little brain break here. Some physical activity. Don't keep sitting where you are. So, with your hands, I want you to show me where your lungs are. It is quite likely that you've made your lungs about yay big. They're bigger than that. All right, I want you to take your hand and I want you to run it up to your clavicle. This is the collarbone. And I want you to go to the very edge of it, right where it goes into your shoulder. Now take your other hand on the same side, go down the length of your ribs to the very bottom of your ribs. And that is the size of your lung when it is completely inflated, approximately. It's significantly bigger than you thought it was, right? How about your diaphragm? Show me where your diaphragm is. Well, I want you to take your hands at the very bottom of your ribs. I want you to, where it goes in, I want you to take your hands and follow that all the way around the bottom of your ribs and go all the way to the back. This is your diaphragm. It is going to seal off the complete sealing off of the bottom of your rib cage all the way to the back, okay? That's where it is. So the actual part of us to be able to breathe is done by the diaphragm. So if you run your hands underneath your ribs and you make them go all the way back through you, that is the diaphragm, and that's where it's located. It seals off the thoracic from the abdominal pelvic cavity. Now these muscles of the diaphragm are going to move, and by them moving along with the intercostal muscles inside your ribs, they move too. They are going to change the volume of your thoracic cavity, which in turn changes the pressure. Here's a little GIF of something you could make at home to demonstrate this. So you could actually make this at home with a soda bottle, cut the bottom off, put a balloon on, put straw in the top with a hole in the middle, and on the bottom of the straws inside the bottle are going to be balloons. As you pull down on that balloon diaphragm at the bottom, do you see that the balloons inside inflate? They're not actually blowing them up. They just inflate because the air gets sucked in. And as they push up on the diaphragm there, the air inside those yellow balloons go out the top. This is exactly what happens with us breathing. So as you can see in this little image here, as the pressure changes in order to allow the air to come in or go out, it's all to do with the volume change. As the diaphragm pulls down and the rib cage goes up, our volume increases. So if the volume has increased, then the pressure inside our lungs has decreased, but the pressure outside us remains the same. Okay, so the pressure outside remains the same, but it is less inside. So the air differential doesn't like being different. So the air from outside rushes into our lungs, and that's how we inhale. But in order to exhale, the diaphragm pushes up and the volume of the sheets decrease. So the volume decreases, which means that the pressure inside our lung has now gone up. Well, again, the pressure differential doesn't like to be different. So the pressure inside us goes out to equalize, and that's how we exhale. So this is all to do with Boyle's law. This Boyle's law is inversely proportional of the pressure and the volume. P1V1 equals P2V2. Very important, you must learn this, okay? So this is all to do with chemistry and gas laws, right? As the volume changes, the pressure will change in the opposite direction. So as the volume goes up, the pressure goes down. As the volume goes down, the pressure goes up. And it's all to do with the pressure inside versus outside in the atmosphere around and the differential there. So you can see in this image and this little movie how as we're changing the volume, I change the pressure inversely. And this allows for the air to come in and go out of our lungs. Really pretty cool. Okay, so this is a weird diagram, but hopefully this helps explain what I'm talking about. So this is Earth and this is the atmosphere. So at sea level here in Florida, we have this amount of atmosphere sitting on us, so the pressure of air. But if I climb atop of a mountain, can you see how much shorter that is, that line and that distance? That is, there is significantly less pressure on top of a mountain, which is why athletes might go to, let's say, Colorado and up that hill in order to acclimate to that pressure, so that as they go up and they've got less pressure, their body has to acclimate and be like, okay, well, I have to breathe this amount in order to deal with this little amount of air. And then when they come back down to sea level, their air pressure is significantly greater than they were thinking about or previously working in. And so it's so much easier for their body to breathe. Because of the pressure differential, it's more air gets in them easier. They don't have to work as hard. Even easier would be if we went to, say, Death Valley, where there is lower and deeper in the earth than normal sea level, and it's even easier to breathe there. Okay, so the pressure differential, which is why hyperbaric chambers and things get more air into your body, is because of the pressure is greater. How cool is that? So it's all to do with chemistry and pressure and gas laws. That's how we breathe. Okay, I told you we were going to talk about this choking, and now we've figured out how we breathe. Now we're going to talk about choking, because you needed to know this piece before we talk about choking. All right, so the Heimlich maneuver, also known as the abdominal thrust maneuver, whereby if all of a sudden your epiglottis has failed and now you've got food or water that goes down into your trachea, you tend to cough. Well, what is coughing, right? Put your hand on your abdomen, lower than your diaphragm, and I want to feel you cough. Feel your hands on there, cough. Go. Can you feel that muscle contracting and pushing? What is it pushing? It's pushing that diaphragm to get that air to push out whatever it is that's inside your lungs that shouldn't have gone down the trachea, and it coughs it out. But sometimes the little cough doesn't work. So the universal sign for choking is, and the person that's choking might be making a soundless cough and panic, wild eyes going, right? So here's a video.
It can happen in an instant. 1 minute there's friendly conversation around the table, the next minute someone's choking.
Are you okay?
According to the National Safety Council, roughly 5,000 people die from choking each year. Josh Mockley, a Mayo Clinic cardiac nurse, says when you see someone choking, it's important to remain calm as you let them know you're about to help.
So you want to place the thumb side of your fist against the person's abdomen, and then you want to apply the other hand on top of that, and then sharply apply pressure to relieve the air.
It's called the Heimlich maneuver.
1, 2, 3.
Mockley says to repeat the process until you see the object they're choking on come out of the person's mouth.
1, 2, 3. Are you okay?
Oh, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad you feel better.
Yeah, thanks.
If the person loses consciousness before the object comes out, make sure someone calls 911 for help while you continue to work to clear the person's airway.
1, 2.
For the Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Ian Roth.
So what I hope you saw in that last video was that when he noticed that there was another guy that was choking, he went over and said, "Are you choking? Can I help you?" Because if you just run over to somebody who's having a little cough and you're like, "I'll Heimlich maneuver you," and you give them a great big Heimlich maneuver, they're like, "Get off me, dude, you're touching me." Well, this is America. You could get sued. So make sure the number one rule is you ask them. Don't expect them to respond. If they're responding, they're not choking, right? They might be nodding their head and doing this sign and wild-eyed panic, but they're not going to be like, "Oh, yes, please Heimlich maneuver me," because obviously they're not choking if they do. Okay, so if they've given you consent by nodding, you are going to, like this video here, put your thumb around under the diaphragm. Don't be looking for the belly button because, well, what happens if you can't find a belly button like on me, right? So you're just going to guesstimate above the hips, below the ribs, put your thumb in on one side, put your hand over the other side, and you're going to do like a Nike swoosh. Short in, big up. Short in, big up. Well, what happens if the person is obese and your arms don't fit around their belly? Or if the person is pregnant, please do not go in through the baby. It's not going to help the mother. It's certainly going to not help, right, the whole situation. Could hurt the baby. So you go above the level of the fundus, the belly, right, for a pregnant person, just below the nipple line, right? So underneath the breasts, chest thrust. Same thing with somebody who is obese. If you can get your arms around their chest, do it there. If not, you can turn around and put the person up against the wall and push in from the front side, or two people together, you work together to hug the person, arms around either side, and you push in, right? Oh, right. So what happens if the baby, it's not a person like adult, but rather a child? So if it's a toddler or a child, you're going to kneel down, and again, same thing, do the Heimlich maneuver, but be prepared, right? There's going to be less air. There could be the child is going to pass out. So be quick and rapid about it. But what happens if it is a child that can't stand, and it is a baby or a small toddler? Then you are going to do the baby version, whereby you are going to place the baby in your hand, face down. And please make sure that you're not covering their airways. That's going to cause even more issues. Don't also hold them at the throat, because that will crush their blanks, cause even more issues, right? So you're going to be careful holding by the jaw, making sure you're not covering up their nose or mouth. And you are going to give them a good smack on the back with a forward motion between their shoulder blades 5 times, keeping their head lower than their butt. Gravity, let it work. And then you're going to flip them over. Be careful, support the neck, flip them over, and you're going to do 5 chest compressions. Repeat, flip, smack, 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 flip, press, press, press.
5 sharp blows to their back, directly between their shoulder blades. Directly between their shoulder blades.
And then 5 chest compressions right between the nipple line, right? Okay. You may have seen that there's this loo plunger-like, toilet plunger-like device that can work for suctions. Now, the American Heart Association has not yet authorized this as the choking mechanisms, but, you know, if all else fails, having this handy in the cupboard might not be a bad idea, but it works like suction and sucks it out if the person has become unconscious. Just an idea. But what happens if you're choking yourself? Well, who's going to administer the Heimlich maneuver? The answer is you are. You do it by throwing yourself on the back of a chair or corner of a table. Like literally you're going to thrust this chair into underneath your diaphragm to push up. Okay, well, here's the deal. Have you ever heard the rule of 3s? You've got 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. You've got 3 minutes before you're going to pass out, and probably less than that if you're in panic mode. So if this doesn't work for you, what are you going to do? Well, this is whereby if you live, let's say, in an apartment building, or you live close by to neighbors you know are home, it may be worthwhile going and banging on their doors and saying, hey, I'm choking, right? But also, if you are choking like this, you might want to call the emergency services, because they're typically going to send someone if you dialed, right, and they can hear you banging on the chair, and if it comes out and you're okay, well, you can tell them, right? But it's better to have them called than not, because if they're called and they come to you, then they can help revive you, because in 3 minutes you're going to run out of oxygen, your brain's going to pass out, and then you still don't have it. That's curtains. So yes, this is a good way of helping yourself in case there is nobody around. So how does this all work, right? Well, we've got air that is still inside our lungs. Even if we've exhaled, we've still got some air remnants there. And by pushing up on the diaphragm with great force, it helps to expel that air with greater velocity that hopefully will dislodge the item that's wedged in the trachea, and it will then let it to come out. So I mentioned calling emergency services. It's really important that if a baby or a young child has choked, that you seek medical attention, because they've had less oxygen in their body because they're smaller bodies than, let's say, an adult. In the movie that you saw a few minutes ago, you saw that the guy was able to talk and was like, oh, thank you for your help, right? Do they need to go to the hospital? No, probably not. Obviously, if they've passed out, you've done CPR, absolutely you're calling the emergency services. But if they're okay, right, they probably don't need it. Is anybody choked? I have. I remember a time that I was choking. I was sucking on a lemon and the lemon rind, and it got caught in the back of my throat and it lodged itself there. And my mum came up from behind and gave me an enormous whack on the back, and the thing went flying and I could breathe again, and it was a wonderful thing. And I'm very glad that she did that, because it was absolute wild sense of panic. It was horrendous. This feeling of panic that happened when I was choking. Very, very unpleasant. But again, did not need to go to the hospital. And that was a very good thing, because I was on the boat in the middle of nowhere and there was no hospital. So Heimlich maneuver would have been next. But thankfully it came out the first whack on the back. And okay. It's question time again. What is the formula for Boyle's Law? Very important. Okay, illnesses. Lungs are a delicate organ and vulnerable to a range of illnesses. The most common of these in Western countries are bronchitis and emphysema, which are often caused by smoking. So if we don't smoke, it's unlikely that you're going to get these. Yeah. Tubes inside the lungs become chronically inflamed, producing excess mucus, and smoking can also lead to lung cancer. Lung cancer is estimated that it's going to affect 2.2 million new cases each year, and 1.8 million lung cancer related deaths occurred in 2020. That's crazy. It accounts for approximately 11.4% of the total cancer cases and 18% of total cancer deaths worldwide. Shocking. And it's really quite preventable. Here is the crazy thing. Lung cancer is the leading cancer killer of men and women. Most people are thinking, oh, it's breast cancer, or it's right? Because we have a month dedicated for it, and everybody knows that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Well, lung cancer kills far more people than breast cancer. Look at the statistics there. 42,000, almost 43,000 for breast cancer, whereas 125,000 for lung and bronchial cancer. Yeesh. And most of this is preventable. Don't smoke. Another one that I'm going to bring your attention to is asthma. Why? Because asthma is actually really prevalent, and it's increasing in prevalence every year. So when you go off to college, it's quite likely that you might get a roommate or at least a good friend that has asthma. And it's very important that you understand what happens when somebody has an asthmatic episode, because they're really dangerous. People die from asthma every year. And if somebody was around them that knew the dangers of asthma, it could prevent that from happening. So we're going to talk about asthma. It's a chronic disease causing inflammation and narrowing of the airway in the lungs, making it difficult for air to escape quickly. Symptoms include coughing, wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath. And this happens particularly when you get a trigger that causes this to occur, and your airways not only become inflamed and constricted, but then they produce excess mucus. So your airways meant to be looking like this on the far corner, right? They're a nice open airway. But then when it becomes asthmatic, it kind of shrinks up, and then additionally to that, we get this extra mucus that's kind of like, let's wash it all out of this problem. But unfortunately, it makes it even harder to breathe. So I want you to do something with me. Open your hand into a nice big tube and breathe through it. Now squeeze it really tight and breathe through it again. Can you see how much more difficult that was? Well, imagine that that's happening to all of your bronchioles. Every single one of them shrunked up. That was really improper English. Has become smaller and has become constricted and inflamed and then filled with liquid. You can see why it would be a problem and be very difficult to breathe through. There are many things that can make this asthmatic episode occur and have a trigger an asthma attack. Things like pollen, exercise, infections, cold air. We talked about that, how it can shrink them up. Oh yeah, absolutely. Smoke. And some people have food allergies or chemical intolerances. Even things like stress, emotion, excessive emotion, that can cause it, and would need you to have in place to fix this issue. So 1, avoid the triggers if you can, and 2, if you do have an asthmatic episode, then what treatment are you going to have? So a treatment, there is no cure for asthma. Once you got it, you got it. Some people can actually outgrow it. Other people make it worse and grow longer, but and you get the symptoms worse. It can affect anybody at any age, really. Okay, but asthma action plans important to help manage the condition. Monitoring and avoiding triggers, using inhaled medications, being exercise and fit and help your lungs, right? It also can help reduce. So inhalers, let's talk about these. The one on the far right, so I have asthma, okay? I have had asthma all my life. Mine is genetic, so there is a very strong genetic link. So I have asthma, my son has asthma, my mum has asthma, her dad had asthma, and it went all the way through the family. You can see it in the cousins, right? So asthma, we've got the genetic trait of it. Not everybody has it genetically. You can get asthma because of exercise-induced asthma. You can have it because it's just what happened, right? But mine's definitely genetic. I have the trifactor: asthma, allergies, and eczema. With this, it means that I've dealt with asthma all my life. And it's really interesting to see, because of this, the evolution of medication. So my grandfather had no medicine. So when he had asthmatic attacks, when he was a young child, they did nothing. He just basically had to wait it out, which is why people that had asthma years ago, they had a high mortality rate. There was a lot of deaths due to asthma. Then when my mum was growing up, she remembers vividly her mum making her a concoction of sliced onions, sugar, and water, and you leave it in the fridge overnight, and then you get fed this onion syrup stuff. Did it do anything for it? No. Which is why I wonder why she tried feeding it to me when I was a teenager. She remembered this recipe, and I tell you what, it gave me onion breath for like a week. It was disgusting. It didn't do anything for my asthma or at the time bronchitis. It would just... But when I was growing up, I remember my first inhaler. It looked like this one. This was whereby you took a little capsule. It's called a turbo inhaler, and you put a little capsule, you put it in, and the capsule itself is filled with powder. The lid comes off, you twist it, and then you have to suck. Now you're trying to breathe in this powder, and on a good day it's going to go all in your mouth. Very little's actually going to go in your lungs. Oof. But even when you are having an asthma attack and everything's down, even less will go into your lungs. And that was all there was. Then it became this inhaler over here, this blue one. And this was Ventolin. And this was actually made with canisters that were pressurized with CFCs. CFC stands for chlorofluorocarbons. And they're the things that depleted the ozone layers. And anyway, the other thing with CFCs, this pressurized canister made with this chemical, right, is it actually caused asthma. So you're trying to fix the asthma episode with something that's causing asthma. Anyway, Ventolin. It was marvelous. It actually helped to open up the airways and you could breathe. And then we got the evolution to something like this. This could be Pro Air or Zopanex. This is a new medication it's still in the same line of medications called bronchodilators, which we'll get to in a second. But this Zopanex was even better because this was it opened up your airways without affecting your heart rate. Ventolin, similar to caffeine, and it actually, when you're breathing hard and you're trying to have you're trying to get over your asthmatic episode, right? Because you can't get the air in, your brain's getting hungry, it increases your heart rate, increases the rate at which you're breathing, causes heart issues. Now, if you've got an underlying heart issue and you're adding Ventolin, which increases your heart rate, it can actually cause you to have heart problems. Xopenex doesn't affect your heart rate. It just helps to open up the lungs. Amazing. Now, here's the cool thing. Evolution of medicine. We're getting better every year with our medicines. We're also getting better with costs. So, thinking back to our insurance and our prescription costs. Originally, when Xopenex first came out, I remember paying $100 copay for this brand new medication. And it was phenomenal medication that, I paid $100 for this rescue inhaler. It was far cheaper than going to the hospital. But over time, this copay has come down. So it's now been 25 years since Xopenex came out. And now my copay for it is, I think, about $30. So significantly less. And so yay, breathing. Breathing is good. So again, when you're having an asthmatic episode, the normal bronchioles are going to constrict and get really small. And so this bronchodilator, remember the bronchioles, trachea, bronchioles, they are going to be constricted with asthma, but the dilator opens them back up when you have this asthmatic episode. Now, if you're really tight and you can't get the air in, you might need a nebulizer. Now, this nebulizer is going to be a machine that helps to get this air into your lungs, and you're breathing it in, and amazing machines. And that's for somebody who's having a severe asthmatic episode. This can help to get the medication into your lungs. But we don't want us to have episodes. So your body might require medication to tell it to chill out. These are corticosteroids. These are going to be medications that help. They can be inhaled, or they can be pill form. And these are going to be medications that help to say, hey, you know what? When you smell that grass, when you smell that smoke, when you get into this allergen or a stressful situation, you're going to want to react. Don't. Chill out. And it makes it so that you don't have these asthmatic episodes. And if you do, they're significantly less than they were. And that's when you would have your bronchodilator, the rescue inhaler. But these medications, these corticosteroids, these are a long-term solution to help to manage asthmatic episodes. And it's going to be very important to manage them because it's actually a very prevalent disorder. Crazy amount of money is spent on asthma, and sadly, crazy amount of deaths. Over 4,000 deaths a year based on asthma. Oof. So why I bring it up? Because again, it's very important to know. So if you have a roommate or a friend, or even you are asthmatic, it's very important to make sure that the people around you know that you're asthmatic, and that you know where your rescue inhaler is. Because if you're not getting the oxygen to your brain's not thinking clearly, that frontal lobe shuts down and it's in survival mode. And so you might be like, no, I'm fine. No, get an inhaler, okay? And seek medical attention if need be, okay? Another one that we've already mentioned before, but I'm going to mention it again, is COPD. Remember, it is an umbrella term. This COPD is a chronic lung disease that can get worse over time, obstructing airflow into the lungs. Third leading cause of death worldwide and sixth leading cause of death in the United States. Kind of crazy. And again, things like chronic bronchitis, irreversible or refractory asthma, emphysema, these are going to be things that are all under the term of COPD. And a lot of this can be prevented by not smoking. Question: what is the type of medication that is used to open up the airways? Not Ventolin, not Xopenex, but rather what is the term used for those medication types. Okay, even just seeing the word makes me yawn. Okay, why do we yawn? Well, a number of reasons why we think we yawn is, one, it activates the brain. It's often triggered when we're bored or when we're tired, so it helps to reinvigorate your brain. It also helps to release a hormone that makes us a little more alert, increase our heart rate. So we tend to yawn when we're tired, and it helps to do that. It also helps to decrease your brain temperature by bringing more blood to your face. So that could be another reason why we yawn. And it also helps to take in more airflow, which again can help to circulate and cool your brain down, reinvigorate your brain. Did you realize that yawning is contagious? So hopefully, maybe sometime right now. Excuse me. Yawning is contagious because it's done going back to evolutionary trends of showing empathy, and helps with bonding and to be part of a clan, be part of a group of individuals, right? Very important to help with that and for bonding issues, or for pathways of bonding with your family and your clan. But they actually found that they took they did a study, right? Really large group of people, and they found that those that didn't yawn also were more likely to show trends and personalities of psychopathic traits. Kind of interesting. So I'm really hoping that you've yawned. In fact, tell me, how many times have you yawned in this presentation? I know I've yawned a lot. Excuse me. Okay, hopefully that's enough about yawning. But right now, do you realize that you're not actually breathing in very deeply? And this is because we don't use all of our lungs all the time. In fact, we only breathe shallowly when we're sitting, about 500 milliliters. But when we're running, we actually breathe really deeply, right? 4 to 8 times the amount of breath running compared to sitting, which is probably why, back to yawning again, we yawn sometimes, is because when we're sitting and we're breathing shallowly, we don't breathe in and we don't use the lower portions of our lobes of our lungs, and they get stagnant. And so when we're tired or we're sitting and we're not doing very much, we might yawn to help to circulate the air over those lower thirds to help you breathe properly, because otherwise, if you don't, you might lead to something called pneumonia. Pneumonia can be either a bacterial or a viral infection that walls itself off with pus in filled up areas, and so your body seals it off, and it can cause lower portions of your lungs to get this pus and walled off area, which causes you to not be able to breathe as much and not have as much exchange of air. That's a problem. This also is a case like if you've had surgery, you might get this incentive spirometer whereby you keep breathing to raise the level up, and because it wants you to breathe deeper, because if you've had surgery, anesthetic or abdominal surgery or surgery in itself, when you've had anesthetic, right, you don't really want to breathe very much because it's still very, very sleepy, which increases your likelihood of having a secondary infection like pneumonia. So they give you this incentive spirometer to make you breathe deeper. When I had my abdominal surgeries, I was made to do this quite often because I didn't want to breathe deeply because it hurt. Well, if I didn't breathe deeply, it was more likely that I was going to get pneumonia, and we didn't want that. So breathing deeply helped to change over the air inside the bottom of my lungs in order to make sure that I didn't get a secondary infection. Okay. So what organ is really controlling how much you breathe, controlling the rate of which you breathe, control the oxygen concentrations? Hopefully this is giving you enough clue. Okay, Breathing, as you can tell, is really, really important. Without breathing, you're going to have trouble, right? You need breathing to help your brain, to help all of your other organs, to process cellular respiration. But did you realize that breathing is actually really important for your mental health as well as your physical health? So, for example, if you breathe, it helps to reduce the amount of stress and anxiety. So if you're feeling really anxious, like let's say a test is coming up, what is the best thing you can do? Sit there. Take a moment and breathe. If you've got somebody asking you questions, take a moment, have a breath. Why? Because remember that cortisol, that stress hormone, the only antidote to cortisol that shuts down that frontal lobe for thinking, for emotion, for processing, for memories, is going to be oxygen, right? It also is going to have a calming effect on our blood pressure, all sorts of things. It helps you to unwind right before bed. Take some calming breaths and it will improve your sleep quality, which we know sleep is essential for everything you need to sleep, to allow your body to reset, for healing, for processing memories, for studying, sleep's important. Breathe right before you go to sleep. It will help you sleep better. It also will help you to boost your energy levels. You can't have cellular respiration producing adenosine triphosphate, your energy molecule, without that oxygen. You need to help it. It also helps to reduce pain. So if you've got chronic pain, breathe through it. You know what happens when we have pain? We tend to hold your breath. Well, that's not going to do you any good. So if you're in pain, try to learn to breathe through it, right? If you're breathing through the pain, it will help you to get the oxygen, to reduce that muscle tension, to help you to not make it worse, right? If you're actually clenching and muscle contractions and spasming while you're in pain, you can actually cause yourself to increase the amount of pain, increase the problems that is going to happen. So if you breathe through it, you actually are going to help to reduce the pain and help your body to maintain the right level of pain rather than exacerbating it. If you're not breathing properly, you can cause inflammation in your body. You can also cause problems with then infections in your immune response. And breathing helps prevent you from getting sick. Breathing also helps you to focus and concentrate. And so take a moment, have a breath. Focus again. Anytime that you're doing these lectures, take a moment, have a breath, pause it. Go out, sunshine, breathe in the sunshine. It'll help to refocus your brain. Also helps to lower your blood pressure, helps to reduce your stress hormones, helps to reduce that cortisol, shutting down the front of your brain. Do you see the importance of it? It also helps you to digest. So rather than sitting there, nom, 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 shoveling food in your mouth and then going on to the next thing, if you actually sit there and you breathe and you eat slowly, it's going to help you to digest and absorb the food, helps to put your gut motility into play. Breathing, so important. And because we now realize that breathing is so important, there are many breathing techniques that have been created to help you to remember to breathe. Any number of these places, the National Institute of Health, Mayo Clinic, American Lung Association, these all have great ways to help to breathe and the benefits of breathing. Yoga. Why is yoga so important? Why is practicing mindfulness associated with breathing? Because these two go hand in hand to help with your mental health. Physical health is with breathing. There's even an app you can download onto your phone or online, the Calm app, that helps you to give you guided meditations or even just simple breathing. So right now, I want you to practice this balloon belly breathing. Okay, I want you to place your hands on your belly and I'm going to do it with you. Okay, so think that your belly is a balloon. Okay, put your feet flat on the floor, sit up nice and straight. You can close your eyes if you want, and we're going to breathe in slowly. And as we breathe in slowly, I want you to feel your hands going away from your body, pushing away by your belly as if you're belly is a balloon and inflating. So breathe in slowly through our nose. Why? Because of the filtration, because of the lubrication, because of the protection, because of... So we'll breathe in through our nose, count in slowly for a count of, 5 or however long you need. And then hold the breath for a moment and then breathe out again slowly. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Let's breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's do it again. In. Hold. Out. I feel calmer already. Repeat this as many times as you want before continuing. Okay, so here's a nice little review that you can see. We discussed a lot about the anatomy. We talked about how the physiology is that we're going to do the exchange of gas, and by the process of diffusion. Make sure you know that. We also talked a little bit about the diseases, and this will give you a nice little overview. Make sure that you're remembering it. So a question for you. What do you think would happen to your body if you didn't excrete the carbon dioxide and you had that change in pH? So if you had a problem with getting rid of the carbon dioxide, remember that that would cause the pH levels to change, which would denature your proteins. Okay, let's have a look at this image here. Let's see if you can figure out which letters match with what. See if you could tell me what letter C was. And hopefully you realize that that's the trachea. How about H? Hopefully you realize that's the diaphragm. Okay, let's see if you know this one. Which organ doesn't function properly when we have the hiccups? Hopefully you realize that it was actually the brain that wasn't functioning properly, causing the diaphragm to spasm and then make that sound. That's where your vocal cords have an issue where you get this hiccup. Kind of clever, right? So your diaphragm and your brain, and remember, your brain can't do two things at once, so trick it. Make it do something else, and then your hiccups will go away. Okay, to do. Let's make sure that you understand. The first thing you got to do is breathe. Take some deep breaths, right? Hooray. Okay, and keep breathing because breathing is important. You've got some labs to do. You're going to build your lungs out of clay. And then there is a comparative lung dissection and a pluck, which is the trachea, the lungs, and the diaphragm that you are going to watch the dissection of. And then you have an essay comparing the different types of smoking, explaining what lung cancer is, and then basically drawing the conclusion that smoking is stupid. Any form of it, whether it's an e-cigarette or any form of tobacco use. No, your lungs don't want it. Don't do it. No. Okay? So again, if you've got any questions, please let me know. And if you've made it this far, yay! Take a big deep breath and woohoo! High five. Well done.